Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you out there. My name is Anthony Bartolo, your host of AZ Update, and I'm so super excited. Thomas Meyer is gonna come after me for saying that. Super excited for my co-host today. Co-host today is none other than Sonia Cuff. Sonia, how you doing?
Hey, Anthony. I'm great, thank you. Look, it's getting a little bit late here in Australia right now, so as you can see, I'm in my pajamas and I'm nearly ready for bed.
Well, I apologize to keep you awake, but as I said, super excited to have you here. You're my partner in crime when we're at Microsoft Ignite in Orlando, riding all the roller coasters, as crazy as we are. And talking about cars, you actually just picked up a really nice car, a new Mercedes. I'm still looking at new cars myself, so tempted. Unfortunately, a little bit small for me. It's midnight for you right now in Australia, yes?
Yeah, it is. And look, I think that's one of the things I'm most disappointed about is we're going to miss out on our annual roller coaster rides. I think I need to sneak down to our local theme parks, which are open here in Australia, and get in a few Superman escapes and Arkham Asylums.
It's a Adventureland. Oh, I think we lost audio. Okay.
Say again?
Nope. Yep. There. It's no. It's Adventureland, right? In Brisbane.
No, Movie World, Warner
Movie
Brothers
World.
Movie
That's it.
World.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to check it out. Unfortunately, the didn't have enough time when I was in Brisbane doing a project for a mining company out there, and I saw it. I'm like, oh, I wanted to go, and I ended up going to the Gold Coast. But definitely, if I ever make it out there again, I'm definitely going to check it out.
We are riding roller coasters, buddy.
Oh, 100%. I'm down. 100% down. Really quickly, big announcement yesterday. Microsoft Ignite. We're looking at September 22nd to the 24th. And Patch and Switch actually went out and showcased a teaser in regards to some information on the announcement. 48 hours of fun is what they're calling it because of the fact it's going to be digital and it's going to be straight through sessions, all held online. And the ability, again, to have that communication and collaboration with product groups is still going to be there, and it's still going to be made available just online instead of in person. Unfortunate, we're not going to be able to ride it time, but I still imagine the announcements they will share will be just as exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was really glad to be involved with the similar format for Microsoft Build that we did for the first time online this year instead of in person, of course. And so to be able to repeat some session content in other time zones around the world, we've got this 48-hour follow the sun model, and it's going to be great to bring that experience so that I don't have to be up at midnight to catch sessions.
Now, some of the sessions are are recorded because of the fact that the 48 hour there's some sessions that get repeated. But you're live in terms of the hosting in your time zone. How does the Q&A happen? How does is there live Q&A that occurs while these episodes are being streamed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a team of moderators, and you'll oftentimes find people from the product groups behind the scenes moderating that chat as well, even if the presentation was pre-recorded and replayed. So definitely a chance to ask your questions and get them answered live in those chat windows, even if it's not a particular live session that you're watching.
Cool. Shall we get started with the news?
Let's go.
Let's go. So you're up first.
Okay, let me bring up. So first of all, one of my favorite products, Azure Sentinel. Now, Pumla did a great interview with Sarah Young a couple of weeks back on AZ Update. We've got a new announcement with Security Operational Center, operational metrics available in Sentinel. So let me just bring that up so I can show that to you. There you go. That should be that now. So basically, if you run a security operations center, or if you've done any sort of service delivery management, which I've done before, you're not only concerned about how many security incidents you've had, but you really want to drill down on the details of what is causing them, what your trends are, and then how long you are taking to respond to those, how long the average time is of those kind of incidents. And so now Azure Security Center, because it lets you create an incident based off your alerts, will feed those metrics back, your incidents created over time, your mean time to triage those incidents. We pop all of that stuff into log analytics, and the great thing about doing that is with log analytics, we can then pop into using some workspaces. And with the workspaces, we can now get some great dashboards and visualize all that data. Because there's two things that run the world, Anthony: Excel and dashboards.
It's true. It is true. And you know what? We make light of this, but the graphical representation that's provided is hugely important for the business unit of the organization that we support to understand where the threats lie and why the investments are made that they're made. I can't stress enough how important it is to have that information sharing in such a way where it's bite-sized, it's graphical, people can comprehend, you know, this is the reason why we spent more money on this X type of protection, or the reason why we're investing in the Azure Sentinel service, because of the fact that we're stopping threats or we're addressing threats as they come in, and here's the proof of everything that's going on. So huge advantage in regards to this. What learning capabilities are coming out of this in terms of connecting Sentinel or having Sentinel having that direct connection into the security incident table?
Well, we're going to see more of these workbooks come out, and people can also contribute to them on GitHub if they start to build their own sort of dashboards with those metrics as well. But it really is about highlighting the fact that security incidents usually only become really visible when they are, you know, big, bad, and ugly, when there's something major or it takes a long time. And so it's really hard to justify sometimes the investment when you're doing a good job. It's like the old IT pro adage, right? When we're doing our jobs right, nobody notices. And this way, with getting those metrics about things that we are doing well and those incidents that we are closing really quickly, or reducing the number of those types of incidents, now we can actually start to make that stuff visible to the business to see the value in the investment that they're making into security.
So awesome. This is phenomenal, and you know, can't wait to see more on this as it becomes available. Let's continue on with the news. Next up, we have news around containers, specifically on Kubernetes. There is now the availability for Azure Monitor, for support of Azure Monitor to view the resources view of Kubernetes. So prior to, you'd actually have to go through the GUI to understand, you know, your resources that are made available inside of your container for Kubernetes. No longer the case. Now you can actually use the Azure portal and use a GUI-based interface to go through and see what workloads are actually running in your cluster, see what pods and attached to what replica sets. As mentioned prior to, you'd have to go through, you have to understand or memorize a bunch of commands specifically into the command prompt to bring out that information. Now it's a click through to understand, you know, and validate what YAML files are being utilized for dev test scenarios inside of your container. Huge advantage, reducing a lot of the complexity. You know, the container implementation and utilization is something that a great move forward in terms of capitalizing on resources and doing it in a much more managed manner. Adding the GUI functionality directly through the Azure portal, you know, I've said this before in terms of the single pane of glass, so crucial for administrators to have that visibility in terms of what's actually being utilized.
Yeah, absolutely. That visibility is key, and that's what one of the biggest fears has been as organizations move into things like containers or serverless, is how do we maintain the visibility that things are working as they should be and they're configured as they should be, and everything's efficient, when we start to lose the connection to that fabric that we're used to monitoring underneath the server application. So great to say, love where Azure Monitor keeps growing and evolving to you know, keep up and meet the needs of these newer technologies.
So let's continue on with the news. Next up, Sonia.
Absolutely. So my next pick is Azure Active Directory My Sign-ins. So this was actually announced, I think it was at last Ignite, in terms of it being in preview, but now it's gone generally available. And not only is it generally available, but they've added in a new feature. So in public preview, this new identity feature meant that our enterprise users could actually go into a portal and they could see their own sign-in history and check and see if there was anything that they thought was unusual. They could see what was going on with their identity sign-in. And previously, that had only been kept in the log files. So we had certain admins that could see it, but not the end user. So now that that has gone generally available and out of public preview, we've got a bunch of customers that have been using it and giving us their feedback back and we've improved it, now we've also introduced the ability for that end user to click on this button to say that this wasn't me or this was me. So we're starting to refine those data signals that we're getting. We're improving those machine learning algorithms, and we're helping to identify with the user's input super easy from this portal, and at one click of a button to say, yes, you got that right, or no, you didn't get it right. And look, sometimes it's just helpful when you are in a different location than you'd normally be, and so it may pick it up as being unusual, but that was actually a valid sign. And so this is really great to see.
Yeah, and hugely beneficial to weed out those false positives. You're away on vacation, you don't have access to your laptop, your child has an iPad or a tablet of some sort, and I got to do this really quickly, and you jump on the device and you do it, and then it comes up in the log file. Something like even like Sentinel would pick up, well, why is this individual logging in from this device that they've never logged in before, outside of their normal parameter areas from an IP that I don't recognize. It's something where it helps and aids in regards to the false positives, but also, if your device has been compromised in terms of security, and now people are actually trying to access your information, having that notification that, hey, this is occurring on the end user to remediate these issues as they come out, hugely beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see visibility to the users and easily being able to get their input into refining those.
All right, let's continue on. Next up, selective disk backup for Azure virtual machines is now in public preview. You and I chatted about this before the show. This is so exciting. Here's the scenario. You have a big HR application that's based on IaaS in a VM on Azure, and you have a huge database, but you don't want to back up your application because the fact that the application, you can just reload it or redeploy it really quickly, but you do want to, just capture your storage disks for where all your data resides. In the public preview, it hasn't gone generally available yet, but in the public preview, you now have the ability to just select and the backup of the specific disks where your data resides and nothing else. So this is a huge, not only a cost consideration, but for a quickness of restore. And the fact that I don't have to restore everything carte blanche, I can just select specifically what I'm going to restore in terms of my backup. Huge. I don't have to store everything. I don't have to restore everything. I can be selective in terms of my storing capabilities. All the security attributes that you would have in a full backup will be also made available in the selective disk backup. So that doesn't degrade in terms of security or what have you, but huge opportunity for administrators in terms of lessening their costs for backup, ensuring backup is actually there, and surrounding backup on disks that are specifically needed in terms of their data or their organization's data, as opposed to just carte blanche backing up everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I often see is setups where you might want to dispose of the operating system. So if you've got a failure, it might just be as easy and as time efficient to spin up a new VM with a brand new install of that operating system and just get your line of business application back, or just get the data back. So to know that you don't necessarily need to be backing up the operating system, because it's fairly easy for you to recover and replace and rebuild from, to just be able to restore those disks and have the ongoing costs of managing the backup of just those. Absolutely brilliant for people, especially running things like line of business applications on those servers.
Let's continue on. So you're up next.
I am. Okay. So next I have Microsoft Authenticator lock is now enabled by default. This was really cool news in terms of further improving the security footprint of our Microsoft Authenticator app that, of course, handles all of our one-time codes for any of our applications or our multi-factor authentication. And this little enhancement actually goes and it looks at whether or not the device that you're running it on has got a PIN or a biometric lock set on it already, and then feeds that through to the Authenticator app to protect the codes inside the Authenticator app and put that extra barrier of security on. So now when you install the Authenticator app, if it detects that that device is protected with a PIN or biometric, it'll turn that on by default for the application as well. So your Microsoft Authenticator, when you bring it up or after you unlock the device and you bring that app up, you're going to need to re-authenticate again. It's actually been a really heavily requested feature from our customers. And as the little screenshot says, you can actually go into the settings of the application and turn that off if it's particularly annoying. But we have valid reasons for wanting that little extra level of protection on this very important security application.
Such a simple feature, but such a hugely requested one, and the fact that adding that additional layer of security on these devices, both iOS and Android, it's something where it's a set it and forget it feature, but it's so crucial in terms of the additional layer of security on these devices. The added benefit to this is if there is a need to, some organizations may not require this. If you have a management tool in place for your mobile devices, Intune or what have you, you do have the ability to push out the policy as well to disable the app lock enablement for biometrics. So if it's something that your organization it doesn't require this, definitely can be governed over by your organization through whatever third-party tool or directly, as you mentioned, in the settings itself. So it's not a have to set if it's not needed by your organization. But why wouldn't you invoke this? It's something where if your device supports it already and it's as simple as a finger scan on your device, why wouldn't you have this invoked and for that additional layer of security to ensure that the individual that's accessing the information is who they say they is?
Yeah, and there's just something nice about the way that Microsoft's approached this that I liked. The fact that we'll actually go out and detect if those PIN or biometrics are turned on the device, and then we'll mimic that setting in the app. But then we give you this great big notification in the app where you go into it to say that we have turned that on by default, and you can turn it off as well. So very much an implementation that is more looking to secure by default, but also giving the option to the end user or the organization about whether or not that's something that they still want to keep enforced.
So let's have a quick look at the chat room to see the discussions that are happening in there today. We have our regulars, Andrew McCullum, and we have Paul Jensen, and they're talking about Raspberry Pi utilization on Kubernetes clusters. So the actual interest in actually investing in a set of Pis to deploy a cluster on. I'm curious in terms of what they would like to do with that cluster and why they're setting up that cluster. I know there was mention of a blog post in terms of steps on how to implement this. There's talk of utilizing the Raspberry Pi for Pi-hole functionality. Are you familiar with Pi-hole, Sonia?
Look, I know a few people that have kind of noodled around with that. It's not something that I've dug into, but they're a great little device, and there's certainly a lot of scope for playing with them.
So for those of you who are not familiar with Pi-hole, it's the whole availability to govern over ads that would come through your internet connection when you're watching shows on YouTube or other platforms. It'll actually block the ads from actually being displayed. If you're watching on platforms like Netflix, the advertisements would be blocked and you would only see the video itself. So a lot of people have taken that as a solution to put as a gateway on their internet access for all the devices in the home to strip out a lot of the advertisements and other functionalities as well to remove ads from blogs and websites and what have you. So it's interesting that they're having the conversation.
Yeah, and those Raspberry Pis, they're such a tiny little device. Like I remember back in the day, if you wanted to do anything on a home network, you had a big, server tower, or a PC desktop sitting there with the fan going, and it was noisy as anything. So It's amazing to see that we've now got, these really compact devices, and we're looking at creative ways, maybe not necessarily in a business sense, but replacing some of that sort of home functionality and what we can do within this tiny little device.
Raspberry Pi and a 3D printer are a dangerous pair because you can build out anything you want. It's just insane in terms of what you can do with the two. I've seen schematics for handheld gaming units to remote control cars to you name it. Anything you can think of, it's a great proof of concept platform to build out on. So
now you've got me thinking about putting a Raspberry Pi in a remote control car. Like we need to make this happen.
That would be a challenge. We could have a race on that. That'd be cool. Let's continue on with the news. So next up is the events that are happening this week, and it is the Fortnite Friday, as Patch and Switch call it. So Patch and Switch will have their show this week. I've been told that there will be more information about Microsoft Ignite. Producer Pierre is chatting in my ear. Sorry, say that again, Producer Pierre. Okay, got to specify. Producer Pierre is talking to Sonia and interrupting my conversation. As always, we might have to bring in Producer Steve from Patch and Switch, and now he's swearing in my ear. All right, so Patch and Switch have another episode tonight, or today. Actually, it would be early morning for you, Sonia, to watch the live stream, because that's actually happening in an hour and a half. Please go to bed. You're not missing much.
Okay, sorry, boss. Okay, so recording.
It's all good. But they will have more news on what's going on with Microsoft Ignite, and we'll be talking about the announcement that they talked about earlier. So definitely check that out. Sonia, you actually wanted to share something really quickly about the Azure meetup that occurred last week.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had the Melbourne Azure user group I sat in on remotely. Now, bit of a special treat to be able to watch these user groups that are in different locations, of course, now that they're all going online instead of being in person. And unfortunately, our colleagues down in Melbourne are undergoing the strongest level of Australian lockdown that we've seen with COVID-19. So our thoughts go out to them. But it was a great little session on Windows Virtual Desktop, really comprehensive from a technical perspective, told you everything you needed to know in terms of prerequisites, Active Directory integration, right through to some demos. And so we had a really great job on that. Now, I haven't been able to find a copy of the recording for that yet, but Roshan Yalaburji from Ingram Micro presented that, and he actually has a series of similar content spread over 4 videos on YouTube. So we'll make sure we get some links in the show notes if you want to go through and get some really in-depth information and some great demos on Windows Virtual Desktop.
I know this human malware presents a huge challenge to all of us, but it also presents a great opportunity in the fact that we have a new ability to learn from each other. I was always so appreciative of the fact that I could, travel around with the Microsoft Ignite tour and learn from all the people that we get to interact with on how they adopt technology. In every country, every city adopts it differently from, the way that we adopted in North America and what have you. So it's such a treat to actually learn from individuals in terms of how they're doing this. The whole digital opportunity, I can attend a meetup that's occurring in Melbourne and, get the insight from the presenters in terms of their perception of the technology, their perception of adoption. Huge advantage just to have that different way of thinking in terms of the way that Azure services are being adopted, and to even share and participate into that conversation. Having it at a global scale, it's an advantage for anybody to learn and have a more rounded perspective in terms of implementation of these services.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is just so much information out there. It's really interesting. I saw quite a few tweets and discussions go out from a few different people about Azure Fundamentals content that they were putting together. And I'm like, you know what? It's so great to see our communities go out there and create content and speak to audiences about this stuff. So if you've got any expertise or any projects that you've done at work, lessons that you've learned, contact your local user group, talk to them about maybe doing a remote presentation, write a blog about it, do a little video. Don't think that just because somebody else has done it, that you don't have something to share, and that there's a learner out there that might pick up on things that you've said or experienced. So there is certainly no limit on the amount of content out there, and we love to see people in the community sharing what they've learned, because I learn something new every day. It's amazing.
And what a great segue in terms of learning to our Microsoft Learn module of the week. I swear this episode of AZ Update must be sponsored by Alex Simmons. So today's Microsoft Learn module of the week, strengthen authentication via conditional access with Azure Active Directory. This module is a 24-minute module. It's 6 units, and it'll get you through understanding implementation of multi-factor authentication for your passwordless environment. We talked about, the Authenticator app. This is also included in the talk here, in the talk tracks that are here. Again, these are based on your input in terms of the audience that are watching the show and that are participating online, that are chatting in user groups, and what you would like to see and what you would like to add to the Microsoft Learn repertoire for learning. This one was loud and clear in terms of its creation. And the fact that there's a specific module on this that covers over in 6 units. We would love to hear your feedback in terms of what you would like to see added to this, or what would you like to see change to this. This has been out for a while. It's got a high scoring, but we do, appreciate feedback coming from the audience in terms of how do we make this better? How do we, possibly add additional modules to this learning path? How do we add create a brand new learning path or module altogether to address different functionality? There's been a lot of people that have reached out in terms of implementing this technology or sharing the information on this technology from a developer's perspective, and how to include the APIs to invoke the multi-factor authentication, which is not covered in this module here, and maybe should be something that's created. Sonia, what do you think?
I love to see it spelt out really nicely and clearly about that multi-factor authentication implementation with conditional access. The first thing that happens when you start talking about MFA to an organization that doesn't use it is they get all stressed about the fact that everyone's going to be prompted for a code every time every time their computer locks, and that's definitely not the case. So conditional access is a very powerful tool to be able to segregate when that MFA gets enforced, and more importantly, when it doesn't get enforced, and to actually have the module up there for people to step through is great. We've got super detailed documentation at docs.microsoft.com that will give you all of the ins and outs of here. But if you want something a little bit more bite-sized, just to test out a few of the topics and learn them overall, Microsoft Learn's a great place to start.
So Sonia, can't thank you enough for having you on the show today. I know it's bedtime. You're ready to go for bedtime. If people want to follow you on the socials, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I've got my hot cocoa. I'm ready for bed. Yes, you can find me on Twitter at soniacuff.com when I'm awake, which will not be for the next 8 hours. It's Saturday morning here in Australia, and I am sleeping in tomorrow morning. So it was great to be able to stay up a little bit late tonight. Back in my younger days, I probably would have been staying up to go clubbing. I'm a little bit past all that now, but
we're all past that.
Yeah, we'll let the young people go out to the club. I'm going to bed. Thank you so much for having me, Anthony. It's always fun.
And if you want producer Pierre to be chatting in your ear like he does ours, you can follow him on the Twitters at Wired Canuck. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me at Wireless Life. And if you want to follow the show, you can follow the show at AZ Update Show and see the recap on itopstalk.com. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's show. You've been a wonderful audience as always. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Good night, everybody.